It's pretty amazing today, the person that I get to introduce. It's pretty exciting for me. Marcus said that he was going to be gone, and sometimes, different ones of us that are on staff will fill in for him. But I said, I think I have someone that might be interested in preaching while you're gone. And so I asked this person, and he is recently retired. He's been a pastor for so many years, been in ministry for 40 years. So if that'll tell you something. But he spent a lot of time serving our country as a Marine and in the Army. But then he came to Christ and said, you know what? I'm going to spend the rest of my life serving the one who made our country, and that's God. So he's just been in ministry for a long time, and all of those things are great and wonderful. He has a great heart for evangelism and has gotten to just share the gospel with so many people all around the world. But the biggest thing for me is that he is my dad. So I got to grow up with him and just see the example that his life is. And he taught me something so very important, and that is that a relationship with Jesus is the most important thing in life. We can have so many other things, but what matters the most is truly knowing Jesus Christ. So this is who I get to introduce to you today. My dad, Den Slattery.
We're happy to be here with you today. Anyone who knows me knows that I love books and love to read. I always figure there's something good in every book, because otherwise I wouldn't publish it, right? And so in my own personal library, I collected over the years about 5,000 books and so on. And when I decided to retire here in the last year or so, my wife thought it would be a good idea if we downsized. Instead of having 5,000 books that we're carrying around in hundreds of banana boxes, she thought it would be good if we got rid of some of those. So I got rid of about 4,000 books. It was a little tough, but to let them go. I didn't want to sell them to garage sales because I guess I should turn this on, shouldn't I? Yeah, that would be good, huh? All right, there you go. I think it's still on, yeah. Okay, good. Anyway, I didn't want to sell them at a garage sale for a quarter, so I just decided I'm giving them away to different organizations and so on, and so they're spread all over the world right now. But anyway. I still had kept about 1,000 though that I really love, and it doesn't have to be a long book to be a good book. I think if you can say something in 100 pages, why do you have to take 700 pages to say the same thing? And so some of my books are short, but doesn't mean they're not good. I've also written about a dozen books of my own. I hope to hit 21 before I die, but anyway. One of the books that let me just start this. One of the books that I've given away a lot, all of these books are books that I've read numerous times. Prison to Praise by Merlin Crothers. He was a Army chaplain, and I ended up becoming an Army chaplain. We knew each other and so on. I endorsed his books, he endorsed my books, and anyway, great guy. This is a story of his life and how he went to become a chaplain, and one of the lessons he learned about the power of praising God. It's a great little book, Prison to Praise. Merlin has now been graduated to heaven and so on, died in his 90s, great man of God. Anyway, another book that I really like is called Is That Really You, God? By Loren Cunningham. He was the founder of Youth of the Mission, and that's the organization that Darcy and Anoop were with. Darcy was with them for, about a dozen years or so. And I served with them overseas in Scotland for a summer. Our youngest daughter just got back from Athens, Greece, where she was dealing with Syrian refugees and so on. And she served with YWAM over there. And this is the story of how YWAM started. It's also about knowing the voice of God and finding His will and so on. Great little book. Another book that I really like is called Hatchet. One of the things I've done just for a hobby is teaching outdoor survival. And this is a story of a boy. He's about 10 years old, and he's in a small plane, and the pilot dies as they're flying over Canada, and the plane crashes into the water, and the boy is trapped in a forest in Canada, and the only thing he had on him was a hatchet. The plane went down in the water and it sunk, and he happened to have a hatchet that somebody had just given him for that trip, and he had it attached to his belt. And it's a great story. I've read this to our kids numerous times and so on. It's a great read, Hatchet. And another book I really like is called Destined for the Throne. It's one of the few books that I've read over and over and over again. I just started reading it again just recently. I've read it over 6 times. Destined for the Throne by Paul Bilheimer. Great book on prayer. One of the best books I've ever read on prayer. And finally, The Cross-Examination of Oliver Finney. It's a story of a billionaire who wants to find out, he's got cancer, he's dying, he wants to find out what is the best religion in the world. And so he gathers together spokespersons from each major religion, from Islam, from Buddhism, from Hinduism, from atheism, and also from Christianity. And he gathers them together on a deserted, on a resort island, and brings in TV cameras and so on. And he's going to broadcast this to the whole world, and he's going to finally find out which is the best religion in the world. And it's a great read. It's written by Randy Singer, and it's worth your time. So anyway, I like all those books, and I think even my 12 books that I've written are really inspired. But you know what? None of them compare to my favorite book in all the world. And my favorite book in all the world is this one. It's called the Bible. And there is nothing like this book. It was written by 40 different men over a period of 1,500 years, written on 3 different continents and 3 different languages, Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic. It has everything in it. I mean, there's romance, and there's betrayal, there's forgiveness, there's spies, there's mystery, there's murder, there's intrigue, there's just all kinds of things in this book. It's pretty amazing. You have young boys killing giants. You have villains willing to kill their mother. You know, I mean, it's just filled with everything. It's an amazing book. And I have read it over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm still finding things that I don't understand and that are mysteries to me. And it's just an amazing book. It can speak to you. It speaks to me almost every day. Even though I've been reading it for 45 years now in my life, I still find things that just capture my heart almost every day when I pick it up and read it. It's like this book is alive. It's a strange book. There's no book like it on the planet. I didn't always feel that way, though, about this book. As a matter of fact, I picked it up one time when I was about 8 years old. I thought I'd see what's inside. And so at 8 years old, I picked it up and I just opened it somewhere. And I was going to read just a little bit, and I read about one paragraph. And it had words in it like hither and thither. At 8 years old, I really didn't know what a hither or a thither was. And it had other words in there that were so archaic, and I just thought, I don't get it. Man, who talks like that? And so I tossed it aside. Thought, this thing is irrelevant for me. I grew up in a family where, for us, we went to church, but we didn't let it interfere with how we lived our life. You know, we went for the fun stuff. Let's go for the hay rides, let's go for the potlucks, you know, let's do fun stuff. And my mom liked to sing in choirs and so on, and so she would oftentimes do that, and she'd kind of drag us along with her and so on. But I didn't really get church. It was more about just shutting up, you know, than anything else. Shut up! You know, my parents would say on a frequent basis, you know. Sit still, don't move. Who's going to enjoy that, you know? That wasn't much fun. And I really, as time went on, I ended up, as a teenager, having fun on Saturday night. And who wants to get up early on Sunday morning to just be told to shut up? It wasn't much of an incentive to get out of bed. And so I got to a point where I didn't like church. And then I went from there to really not even believing that there was a God. So by the time I was a teenager in high school, I really didn't even believe in God at all. Everything changed, though, when a friend of mine came home from this place called Vietnam, and he told these stories about wild things that had been happening to him in Vietnam, cockroaches that are this big and they fly, and just so many wonderful things that just sounded like a life of adventure. And so I went down that very next day and signed up. I always figured the Marines were the best, so I better go with the Marines, right? Hoorah! And so anyway, so I went down and signed up with the Marines. And they sent me right out to Marine Corps Recruiting Depot in San Diego, California. And even though I went there as an atheist, as soon as I got there, a guy came on our bus. He had a Smokey the Bear hat on, and he told me he was God. So it's like, wow, so I'm finally meeting you right here. And this guy came on, and he was walking down the aisle of the bus, and he was explaining how that he would tell us when we could use the bathroom, and when we were going to eat, and when we were going to sleep, and when we were going to run, and when we were going to walk and talk and everything. He was going to be like God to us. And he was walking down the aisle of the bus, and some guy smiled at him, and he said, what are you smiling at? Puke? Boom! Punched him right in the face, knocked him right in the aisle. And he said, I'm giving you girls. That was one of the things they called us. I'm giving you girls 10 seconds to get off this bus. And if you don't get off in 10 seconds, if you're the last one off, I'm going to make you do push-ups until the ambulance comes. And then they said, go! Everybody grabbed their gear and pushing everybody out of the way and tried to get out to be the first. And that night we got our hair shaved off, and we got our introduction to the Marine Corps. Before we could put on the Marine outfit, though, he said that we were civilian scum. We had to wash it off. So he said, I want you all to get in the showers. Take off all your clothes, get in the showers. And so we got in there, and then he said, all of you get on the floor. And so it was a big shower stall, and we all got on the floor. And then he and his friends turned on the cold water. And he said, now you're going to learn the Marine Corps hymn before you get out of here. I said, I don't even know there was a hymn. But anyway, that night I learned the Marine Corps hymn. Every time I hear it, I still have warm feelings, that run through me. And I remember that moment when I first learned it, And anyway, that was my introduction to the Marine Corps. For the next 13 weeks, they owned us. And they beat us and they humiliated us. They made us at times walk around like ducks quacking. Can you believe it? Throwing sand in the air and everything else. He said, this is because you guys don't know how to march, man. We're going to teach you. And so we had to walk like ducks quacking. Such memories. Well, after my training, we finally came to the moment where we graduated, and we were called no longer scumbag or, all these terrible derogatory terms, but they said, you're a Marine from here on out. It's no wonder, we say, once a Marine, always a Marine. Man, once you get that title, you don't want to have to go backwards, Anyway, and so we were Marines, and after advanced infantry training and jungle survival school, I came down on orders for this wonderful place on the other side of the world called Vietnam. And I got over there, and I was in an infantry unit. Out of the 200 men I went over there with, only 25 of us survived, and most of us were wounded at least once. They would often send us into areas where we were outnumbered 2 or 3 or 4 to 1, and they'd say, fight your way out, And That's just the Marine philosophy. It's just the way it was. Heavy casualties we took. I'll never forget the first firefight I got into. Happened about 10 o'clock at night. We were in a rice paddy. We were going to go out there and set up an ambush for the enemy to come along. Then we were going to shoot them. But instead, they were already there waiting for us to arrive. And they started shooting at us before we could even get set up. Bullets were flying all around me and so on. I hit the deck, got behind a rice paddy dike, stood about this high. And I thought, man, I'm 19 years old. I could die here. Bullets were zinging by my ears, hitting around my feet. And I just thought, this is it. This is the end. This is my first battle, and I'm going to die. And as I was laying there, waiting for death to come, some questions just popped into my mind from out of nowhere. I believe now that God sent those questions to me, but at the time I didn't have a clue. I had never thought these things, but suddenly there, thinking I'm going to die in any minute, these questions came to me. Why am I here? What's the purpose of life? What happens when you die? Is there a God? I didn't know the answers to those questions, but I decided right then and there, when I get out of here, if I make it out alive, I'm going to search for the answers to those questions. And I did. Obviously, I made it out alive, because here I am. For 5 years, those questions haunted me. They were with me all the time. And I struggled. I asked everybody I could, what do you think the purpose of life is? Do you believe in God? Most of us in the Marines talked about dying with our boots on and taking all the commies we could and, stuff like that. It's just guy talk. I didn't know anybody who knew God. Didn't know anybody could. Just thought it was just a... Anyway, when the war ended, I thought, well, maybe the purpose is just a pursuit of happiness. It's in our founding documents and so on. And maybe that's what I need to do. And so I came home and bought a Corvette. Figured, happiness, man, a fast car, And it was. And I thought also if I could, chase after wild women and, go to college, these would be the things that would fulfill my life. But instead, all I found was emptiness. I found an emptiness in my heart that just kept saying, man, there's got to be more to life than this. There's got to be more. But I didn't know where to find it. And these questions kept haunting me. Man, what's the purpose of life? Why are you here? What's going to happen when you die? I eventually got out of the Marine Corps, and I tried to fit back into society, but I didn't fit too well. We think that you can send people into war zones, and we think it's just like a movie, and that as soon as they come out, they're going to leave their popcorn and come on back out and return to regular life. But instead, we find that the people who have been in combat in situations like that, they've seen horrendous things, people dying on their left and on their right, and we think, well, you're just going to be a normal person. Everything's going to be okay. You'll just forget it. Life will go on. It doesn't work quite that way. I still think about it every day. Every day. I have wept many, many times. I've spoken at the Vietnam Wall and many other places, and I still remember the times when I should have died, the people who took bullets right beside me. I still think about it. And sometimes you wonder, why am I still alive? When all these other people who are around me, they're not here. And I am. And so I didn't fit back into society too well, like many of my comrades, in arms as well. Because we were still thinking about killing, and these memories and nightmares were happening all the time, and I was always waking up looking for my gun, and I didn't feel like people around me understood it. Even my family didn't understand it, and they didn't know what to do with us. And so a lot of us ran back to the military thinking that at least there we'll be understood, and at least there we can find some kind of acceptance. And so that's what I did. I was going to go in the Air Force. I tried to get in. I went down to the Air Force recruiter, and I showed him my discharge papers from the Marine Corps, and thinking that, they would say, oh man, you served in the Marines and we're certainly going to take you. But instead I showed it to them, and they rejected me. I said, no, you're not coming in here. And I said, why? And they said, well, your re-enlistment code is wrong. I said, well, what do you mean it's wrong? I said, you said it's wrong. You got to be 1A or you're just not getting in. I said, oh, okay. I went over to the Army recruiter, and they looked at it and said, sure, we'll take you. Come on in. And I asked them about the re-enlistment code, and I found out later the reason I was rejected from the Air Force was because I got out of the Marines because I was pregnant. Somehow the Army didn't care. They didn't even ask how that happened. They just took me anyway. So I went into the Army, and they retrained me in avionics, working on helicopters and so on, a job that I did for the next 5 years. And then they said, now we have a place where there's lots of helicopters. And they sent me right back to Vietnam. And so I went back for a second tour, and as soon as I got there, the questions came back, Why am I here, and what's the purpose of life, and what happens when you die? We were hit the very first night I got there. And those questions followed me right into the bunker. And I sat there with bombs bursting all around us and wondering, man, what happens when we die? But it was there during that second tour in Vietnam that I met a guy in my unit who claimed to be a Christian. I mean, he was one of these weird guys who carried one of these books around. You ever met anybody like that? Carried a Bible with him? I hadn't met anybody like that. He was kind of a weird person to me. But as we were talking, and I told him about my questions and so on, he said a strange thing to me. He said, Den, this book has the answers to the questions you're asking. I said, man, I just laughed at him. I thought, you got to be kidding. There's nothing relevant in that book, man. It's filled with hithers and thithers, What are you talking about? And he said, no, it really does have the answers. And I said, show me anything relevant. And he said, open it anywhere. Okay, I'll show you. I didn't know the Bible. I didn't know what book to even look at. But I just opened it up in the middle. It happened to fall open to the book of Proverbs. And I was going to look down the page. I was going to find a hither or thither and just throw it at him. But instead, when I opened it up, I looked halfway down the page and I found what I often say is the most powerful verse in the Bible. There are verses in the Bible that you may not even understand. You may think, what is that doing there? That's stupid. I mean, why would you put a verse like that in there? And this may be one of them. But it spoke to me. There is power in this book, I'm telling you. And so I looked at that verse and I was stunned. My arguments were decimated. I'm sure you'll agree. This is the most powerful verse in the Bible. It's found in Proverbs chapter 25, verse 24. It's actually in there 3 times, so you know it is significant. And here's what it says. It is better to live in the corner of an attic than in a beautiful house with a cranky and quarrelsome woman. I said, amen. That is truth. That is truth. Man, even I can understand that one, I started flipping the pages and, I found little nuggets of truth like that on every page. I was shocked. How could it be? And so I went out and I prayed a prayer. First real prayer I had ever prayed. Surrounded by barbed wire, it's dark out, I'm looking up in the sky in Vietnam. I said, God, if you're for real, prove to me that you exist and I'll believe in you. And as soon as I turned to leave and to walk away, I knew there was a God, and I knew that He had heard my prayer. Shortly after that, the war ended, and I came home from Vietnam. And although I was reading the Bible in the daytime, I was still living like the devil at night. But I'd study it in the daytime, go out, party at night. And I knew there was some disconnect there. I knew that didn't quite make a lot of sense, but that's just the way it was. I remember I went to one church. I was so convicted of my sins at one point that I went out into my car and just wept. I wanted to find God, but I didn't know where to look. I didn't know, how do you find Him? And weeping in my car, I thought, maybe you find Him in church. I don't know. I don't know if He lives here or what, but I figured maybe He's there. And so I used to pass by a church on my way to the bar all the time, and it was a little white church, and there were often cars there. Even on a Friday night, I thought, what is wrong with you people, man? Don't you have anything better to do? I'd often swear at them as I drive by, in my sports car. I think, what's wrong with you folks? And but when I was looking for God, I thought, I'm going to go to that church. And so I went to that church that next Sunday, and the pastor caught me before I got out of the door after the service was over. And he said, come on out to lunch with me. I said, okay. Free lunch. So I went. And after lunch, he pulled out a Bible. He was one of those people that take it even to lunch, And your problem, you need to be baptized. I said, okay. I had never really even heard of baptism, I didn't know what it was. So he took me back to his church, and he had a little tub right behind the pulpit, and it was just him and me, and he said, let's get in. I said, okay. So we got in the tub, and he baptized me. And after we got done, I dried off and went back out to the parking lot. I got in my car, and he was standing right beside me, and he was smiling as if something really wonderful had taken place, and I just drove off and went to the bar. I thought, what was that all about? Shortly after that, I heard that there was a Christian concert in the park nearby where my folks lived, and I was home on leave at the time, and so I went to that Christian concert in the park. I sat in the back where it's always safe, in case anything weird happens, you can get out quick, So that's where I sat, in the back. And there were about 300 people there. It was outdoors. The person speaking was an evangelist with Billy Graham's organization. And there was the group that was playing was called the Good News Circle. And they sang these happy Jesus songs, and I sat in the back just listening. And I really wanted the joy that they were experiencing, or that they were exuding anyway. And I wanted to know how to get that. And the guy who was the speaker stood up, and he told a story about three guys in the Bible, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, out of the book of Daniel. And these guys trusted God even though their lives were on the line and they might be thrown into a furnace of fire. And they were supposed to bow down to a statue or be thrown in the fire. And they said, we believe that there is only one God, and He's not in a statue, and we're not going to bow down to your statue. Whether our God saves us or not, it doesn't matter. We're not going to bow to your statue. And so they threw them into the fire. And once they were in the fire, the people watching what was going on noticed that there weren't 3 people in the fire, there were 4. one looked like the Son of God. And they were praising God in the fire. And pretty soon the king says, "Come on out of there, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego." And they came out. And the king said, "Their God is God. If anybody says anything against them, let them be killed. Their God is God." And the speaker said, "In the same way that the Son of God delivered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from the fire, you can be delivered from the fire if you will trust in Jesus and turn to Him, the Son of God." And I really wanted to do that. Again, I didn't know how. He said, "Come to the front and we will pray for you." And so I'm sitting in the back where it's safe. They decided to sing "Just As I Am," and I sat there just as I was while they were singing. And I was kind of wanting to go, but I wasn't sure. I didn't want to embarrass myself, in front of all these people. And so I just sat there. I froze into the seat. And then the speaker said, "I think somebody else is out there. You're struggling. God is speaking to you. He wants you to come. You need to get up out of that seat and come up here. We're going to sing it just as I am." And so I was sitting there and I wanted to come, but again, I was frozen to the seat. And when they started singing "Just As I Am," a woman in front of me turned around and looked at me, and she said, "Don't you think you ought to go up there?" I thought, am I in the Twilight Zone? I mean, what has happened here? I swore at her. I mean, I didn't know her. I'd never even talked to her before, but I don't know, some reason I did that. And as soon as I did, it's like the spell was broken, and I got out of my seat and I walked down the aisle and I bowed on my knees and I accepted Christ. I asked Jesus to come into my life. And in that moment, I was changed. I became a new person. My sins were forgiven. I felt lighter. I felt new inside. And I went home and I picked up this book, the Bible, and I started reading it. And I read it for hours and hours. I was amazed. It was like feeding me, and it was amazing. And understood things that I hadn't understood before. It made sense to me, and it changed my life. I love this book. It is amazing, and it can change your life too. It says in here that the Bible, Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12, "For the Word of God is living, it's active, sharper than a two-edged sword. It can pierce right through you." And that's what it did to me. It can correct us. It can show us the right path. It can bring light to our path. It can help us to not sin. It can do so many things. It can change your life. This book is amazing. I was recently reading Max Lucado's book on praying the promises of God. And in the book, he says there are 7,487 promises in the Bible. And behind every one of them, God stands ready to answer. If you will just lay claim of it and do whatever is required in the promise. Sometimes there's conditions, But if you will do what it says and trust in God, that promise can be yours. God stands behind His book, ready to answer. And He answered my prayers. And for 40 years, I've been sharing the truths of the Bible all over the world, and I just want to tell you, there's no book like this book. There's no book like this. This book can change your life, and it's changed mine. And I just want to tell you something. I find hope in it still. I find life in it. Jesus said, "Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God." And God has, through people, written down what He wants us to have. And it's in this book. That's powerful. And it can change you If you don't know Jesus and you've never invited him into your life, I would say to you today, man, say yes to Jesus. Make him your Lord and Savior. We're told in Romans chapter 10, verse 9, if you will confess Jesus is Lord, believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. It's a promise. The conditions are that you have to confess Jesus is Lord. You have to believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead. If you will do that, he will save you and he will change your life. He did that for me, and he can do it for you. Let me pray for you. Father, I just want to thank you for the folks who are here today. I pray your blessing on them. If there's anybody searching, Lord, that they don't know you, I pray that you would, like the hound of heaven, continue to chase after them like you did me. Reveal your truth to them till they cross the line of faith and trust in Christ. Lord, I offer them up to you this day in Jesus' name. Amen.